In this guide, we're going to be going over all of those DLC enemies and bosses in Resident Evil 7 Biohazard. So there's a fair amount of DLC content available for Resident Evil 7, which generally delves deeper into the game's lore and adds more context to its surrounding story, aside from whatever the hell this is. There's two mainline story expansions, both set after the events of the main game, and both having a bunch of new mouldy monsters and freaky bosses for us to take on, with the first one being centered around Chris Redfield's mission to take down the fungal threat in the salt mines, with his big ass shotgun and his Master Chief styled hood. Aside from the basic molded, one of the main enemy types exclusive to the Not a Hero DLC is actually one of the creepiest you'll find in the game. The Fumer might be another mold based enemy, but it's definitely not like any of the others, being a tall, gangly thing with white pale fungus draped all over its twisted body, sorta looking like an orangutan that's taken a swim in a big puddle of acid. That dagger face has been switched out for an eerie looking skull, covered in melting flesh. And the main thing that sets these guys apart, aside from their spooky appearance, is the fact that they can't actually be killed. Not with any bog standard bullets anyway. In a similar way to the Regenerators in Resident Evil 4, shooting at a Fumer is going to be a big waste of time and ammunition. And although they're generally best avoided, that can be easier said than done when they typically like to pop out in super narrow tunnels, completely filled with nasty green spores. Thankfully, you can take them on though, using some special anti-regeneration ramrod ammo found deep within the mines. Though you're going to have to make your shots count, with these rounds being pretty scarce. One of the less exciting forms of molded you'll have the joy to bump into is just a big fat one with no head. These aren't like the other chonky bile-spewing beasts from the main game though, as all they're going to do is charge over and blow up. And that's basically it. Best to pump a bit of lead into that flabby body to put them down before that happens, of course. These exploders aren't the only hefty lumps to wander around the salt mines, as there's also a much more menacing one with similar sort of rapid regeneration abilities as those pain in the arse Fumers. Mama Mold doesn't exactly look very different from the normal fat guys, apart from it being taller and hairier, and having a face that looks like it's just lost a winning lottery ticket. But just like the Fumers, which also emit clouds of steam-like spores, this monster can't be killed by conventional methods, meaning you're gonna have to get your hands on some of those ramrod rounds to put this thing down for good. Just like the basic fat molded type, Mama Mold's also got a bit of an upset stomach too, forcing you to dodge those streams of flying vomit. Lovely. But this creature isn't called Mama for no reason, as unlike the other types, it can also give birth to whole swarms of creepy minions, to make the fight just that little bit more chaotic. These little buggers can be awkward to hit due to their nippy speed, erratic movements, and large numbers, all bouncing around together to temporarily distract you from Big Mama's Chunder Jet. They are extremely weak though, and it's generally best not to get too carried away squashing mold bugs. So long as you keep focusing fire on the big girl, who's pretty good at soaking up an absolute buttload of damage, then you will keep causing the monster to drop to its knees, allowing you to go crazy with those weapons or give that fugly face a nice meaty uppercut. Lucas Baker. Now this guy puts the evil in Resident Evil. He's basically the grown-up hillbilly version of Sid from the first Toy Story movie, and there's no denying that Jack and Marguerite's deranged son is easily the biggest monster of the whole family. Not just because he enjoys torturing the kidnapped victims and subjecting them to sadistic games, but because he chooses to do all of this at his own will. Evelyn doesn't control his actions, and he just likes to be a cold-blooded douchebag on purpose. In the main story, Lucas won't actually fight you himself, but he will put you through a bunch of John Kramer-style tests, living out his power fantasy of being the Riddler as you navigate through a maze of savage traps and puzzles. He gets outwitted and runs away like a big pussy, though we won't get to finally deal with him until the Not a Hero DLC, where we find out that he was actually working with bioterrorist organisations, creating advanced molded variants, such as the Fumers, in a secret lab within the salt mines. Chris Redfield goes on his little mission to find said lab and take him down, and after avoiding all of his diabolical death traps, he decides to pop out behind you brandishing a blade. But of course, bringing a knife to a gunfight probably isn't exactly the smartest thing to do, especially when you're up against a combat-ready soldier wearing tactical gear and you're just a skinny dude in a cotton hoodie. Lucas gets a well-deserved bullet to the face and then just casually melts into a puddle of jam. Obviously, he's infected with the mold, that wasn't just some wicked bullet, and the damage sustained triggers a pretty wild mutation, allowing him to re-emerge as a big mold monster from a big gunky flesh pod on the ceiling. It's time for our first major boss battle of the DLC. He's a pretty basic looking monster as far as they go in these games, just being a random mass of waving appendages with a few heads squished together in the middle. And he's also going to attack you in a very typical gung-ho way, rushing around with those arms swinging around. You want to be aiming for the heads in this fight, with those being the main weak spot, and dealing enough damage will eventually cause Lucas to stumble backwards and reveal yet another weak spot on his chest. Probably best to use any leftover ramrod rounds here, as it's the end of the DLC and there's just no point saving onto them anymore. In typical Resi fashion, Lucas is going to get a bit fed up of being shot and chooses to further mutate, growing even bigger arms and filling the whole room with deadly spores. Just keep blasting away at those glowy bits, using the oxygen tanks on the walls to help you catch your breath, and it shouldn't take too much more firepower to put him down for good. One more shotgun blast to the face just in case he feels like getting back up for another round, because we all know what these bloody bosses are like, don't we? So as one chapter closes, another one begins. The second main DLC, aka The End of Zoe, puts us in the shoes of Uncle Joe Baker, who just so happens to be one hell of a hardcore bastard. He beats the molded up with his bare hands, opens up doors by punching the shite out of them, and happily snacks on random ass bugs he finds crawling about on the floor. With all that said, the line is drawn at mold infested alligators, which aren't going to submit to Joe's ballsy outbreaks of fisticuffs. There's only so many things you can punch in the face before you find something that punches back 10 times harder. I guess having a swampland full of fungus that turns stuff into monsters is a perfect opportunity to throw big angry gators into the mix, especially with them already being dangerous creatures capable of tearing you limb from limb, with them taking a plunge in the bayou's murky waters, waiting for unsuspecting prey to wander on by, i.e. you. Apart from being covered in bulbous growths and having a few creepy features, they're not exactly miles different to normal gators. Slightly larger and more aggressive than usual maybe, but not exactly a typical Resident Evil style abomination. Sneaking past and staying out of their way is the advisable thing to do for most of the time, though if they're blocking your path, or they decide to come charging over with all those teeth on show, then you're going to have to rely on ramming a wooden spear down its throat to avoid getting turned into gator chum. They can be pretty savage, though I guess things could be worse. At least these ones aren't infected with the T-virus. So the award for the most badass looking molded type probably has to go to the one rocking the new metal haircut. These extra pointy variants are covered in jagged spines, and they've also got a pair of crescent moon shaped weapons protruding from their arms, kinda like the bladed ones from the main game. These Spikey boys can be found in the DLC, and do all the typical sort of stuff you'd expect them to do. Slowly march towards you and lash out with those weaponized growths. Though despite looking intimidating, they're not quite as menacing as you'd think. Getting hit is still going to hurt like hell, but they're not very good at taking the punches themselves. So although they might seem like something you should probably be running away from, lobbing a spear at that spiky head or smacking it a few times in the face should still be a fine enough way to prevent them from being a problem. You probably know by now that Resident Evil 7 has a ridiculously large amount of popular horror movie tropes and references sprinkled all over it. Almost every box is being ticked in this game. There's references to The Ring, references to Saw, The Evil Dead, The Shining, The Blair Witch Project, Texas Chainsaw Massacre, there's a spooky little girl, a creepy ass clown, Black Guy Dies First. It's almost a bloody parody. But the horror movie tropes don't stop in the DLCs either, as Joe Baker spends most of his time being pursued through the bayou by a mysterious creature often referred to as the Swamp Man, who seems pretty determined to kidnap Zoe, who's been crystallized and needs a special cure. Joe's gonna have a few run-ins with this muddy looking bug covered swamp dude, forced to do what he does best by punching the monster's lights out. It's a lot more resilient than the other mold men, putting up more of a fight. You might be able to defeat him, but you sure as hell can't kill him. Not yet anyway, as he's gonna keep popping up for another scrap in several different places, getting even more aggressive and using fancier moves every time. You've just gotta keep showing him who's boss and keep whooping his ass to put him in his place. The problem is this guy can regenerate from his wounds and having his head ripped off. And after taking Zoe to a church and using her as bait, you'll run right into his trap where you'll uncover the Swamp Man's true identity. Well, what do you know? Somehow, Jack Baker returned. He survived being turned into a big pile of cement in the boathouse, and now looks like something that fell off Davy Jones's ship. Anyway, Jack's gonna show you some brotherly love by shoving you into a coffin and kicking you down into the murky swamp water. How nice of him. You'll wash up on the riverbank not long after, and stumble across a bunch of blue umbrella crates, one of which contains the bloody Infinity Gauntlet. Going back to the Baker residence from the main game, Zoe just so happens to be chilling out in the front hall, and it's no surprise that Father Swampmas just so happens to be hanging around here too, eager to try and best you in a fight after being beaten up so many times in the past. Jack's definitely a lot stronger and more agile this time around, and he's also going to use a tendril style arm to whip and slap you around with too. But we've also got a bit more power this time as well, in the form of that cybernetic gauntlet. And although this is easily the toughest fight of the DLC, at least you've got something to deal some extra damage back. After you've both been smacked all over the room, dishing out enough pain will eventually let you grab a hold of Jack, charge up the power glove, and give that ugly face one final smash, knocking him across the room where he lies in a calcified state once more. Something he probably should be used to by now. So if you enjoyed this video, then you might want to check out the playlist on the screen right now, where you'll be able to find my other Resident Evil enemy guides all in one place. Big thanks to my channel members for supporting me, and thank you for watching this video right till the very end.